Well, welcome once again to another live production of the Old Cow Report. And of course, this is coming to you live from the beautiful downtown tire factory where Fred worked for what, Fred, 40, 50 years before you retired?
I never worked in here, I'm sorry.
I thought you were here right after the war, right up to
I didn't get
your retirement there.
I didn't get to Eau Claire until 1966.
Of course,
in September.
Of course, with me is there that guy talking there is my rusty, trusty sidekick, Fred, the true staffer. Fred, glad to see you back on the program. We missed you last week. We had a flood of calls wanting to know where you'd been. So where had you been?
When?
Last time. Last week you weren't here.
Last week? I thought we were here. That was 2 o'clock, wasn't it?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
You were nowhere to be found.
I didn't know that.
Roy, you got the master running. All right, that's my old rusty, trusty engineer, Roy Rogers Hoff, who's relayed to Hopalong Cassidy on one side and Trigger on the other. Nice to have you with us tonight, Roy. Okay, well, of course this is live, so there's always we have all the blemishes and everything that come with live television, and we're going to have an exciting show tonight, Fred, and as usual, boy oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about. You know it?
Yes, there's lots to talk about.
If it ain't one thing, it's another. So first of all, Fred, we're going to have to open this edition of the Loyal Order of the Raccoons. So I bring this meeting to order. Fred, do you have any new business?
Yes.
What do you got?
Well, I'll read it later.
Okay, well, Fred, first of all, we've been getting a few email messages, and there's our email address, cows@discover-net.net for you internet surfers out there. That's our email address, and you can send us all the messages you'd like. And of course, our phone numbers for call-ins tonight is 839-6261. And Fred, we got 3 letters here. We had more than that, but I picked out 3 that were pretty nice. The first one says, "Dear Chuck, is that really Fred, or is that a stuffed animal on the set? Signed, Tom C." And that's from Tom. He wanted to know that. Because we do have some stuffed animals on the set here, Fred, and they were wondering if you were one of them there. Okay, the next letter is, "Dear Chuck, I love the show. I'm glad we have someone in Eau Claire giving the conservative viewpoint. Keep up the good work. Say hi to Fred. Signed, Sarah." Of course, she wrote that the show right after the show where you were missing, and we didn't know if you were out in the snowbank or not. And then the final one is, "Dear Chuck and Fred, thanks for being a defender of the taxpayers. We have had enough of those big spending liberals at City Hall. Signed, Bob K. Jr." So there's the 3 we had, Fred.
Good.
And those were pretty nice. We had some more. Some of them were good and some were derogatory, but we picked up 3 that kind of have the spectrum of email that we receive. So go ahead and continue to write to us, and we'll pick out 3 or 4 of your letters to read on the air, cows@discover-net.net. And there we have it. Okay, now, Freddie, got a little more business here. The Public Access Channel 11, which we're viewing on here right now, which you're viewing us on live, is having their annual auction, Fred, and that's coming up Saturday and Sunday this time, November 2nd and 3rd. So that's less than a month away now. And all merchandise is contributed by area businesses, and there's some very exciting things that are going to be auctioned off. A week for a family at Paradise Shores Resort, 1-year family membership to the YMCA, symphony and theater tickets, fine art, Green Bay Packers and other sports paraphernalia, collectibles, clothing, children's toys, original furniture, and other wonderful items, Fred. So there's always a lot to bid on their auction, and there's so much this time that it's actually going to be 2 days long. And the email address here for those of you who would like to write a message to Public Access, it's PACT TV 11, It's all one word, no spaces, small letters, at discover-net.net. Same last ending as mine. We're both on the same internet server. So PACTTV11 at discover-net.net. And you can send them an email address if you'd like to donate something for the upcoming live auction, or just give them a message on how much you love our show. Okay, Fred, got some hot news here right off the old internet, and it's from the right side of the web. And it says here, Clinton and Perot struck a deal to oust George Bush in '92. President Bill Clinton and Ross Perot struck a deal in 1991 that initiated the billionaire industrialist's candidacy as a third-party spoiler to help the then Arkansas governor unseat incumbent President George Bush. I've been saying this ever since 1992, that that's what it was. George Bush was a shill. He was in cahoots with not George Bush, excuse me. Ross Perot was a shill in cahoots with Bill Clinton to unseat George Bush, and if you took Bush or Perot out of the factor there, it would have been a landslide for George Bush back in '92. And now there's a reason why they cut this deal, Fred. And of course they used the United We Stand group as fodder out there to go out and push out the message that we were going to have this great Ross Perot as being president. He used that whole group, plus he used disgruntled Republicans and Democrats, but the whole thing was hatched before the '92 elections to make sure that Clinton would win, because Clinton and his group knew that they would not win otherwise, and they had to have a third-party candidate with untold millions to spend. But there was a payday for Ross Perot, and his payday, I'm going to tell you real quick what it was. Clinton agreed that his first act as occupant of the Oval Office would be to reform the nation's health care system, 1/7 of the nation's business, and with massive changes to provide health insurance for all Americans furnished by government-controlled health alliances. We know what a boondoggle that was and what a big business, big government deal that was, and thankfully it was stopped. But of course Hillary Clinton was going to be the czar of that, and it was just a massive boondoggle. That quid pro quo was orchestrated by Clinton and Perot to open the floodgates to a multi-billion-dollar bonanza payoff for the third-party candidates' already lucrative Dallas-based international health delivery system. So Perot stood to gain millions, perhaps billions, in this health care fiasco that they cooked up before the '92 elections. Documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. And those documents are very hard to come by because the agencies like to censor those very heavily. Reveal that Perot played a large hand in First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton's efforts to craft the ill-fated health reform bill, which turned Clinton's first year in office into a debacle. Perot's name appears prominently on the advisory board for Hillary's now defunct task force, according to a group of doctors who procured the papers through the Freedom of Information Act. Now, if you'll recall, there was 500 people on this board, and it was all blacked out. Nobody knew who was on it. Nobody knew where they stood. Hillary had closed sessions. None of it was made public until now. We're getting the Freedom of Information Act into the process to get these secret documents out to the public. Even more significantly, if not alarmingly, not one but two of Perot's companies were earmarked in Mrs. Clinton's working papers to play a mammoth role in the healthcare industry when they set up this big healthcare socialist system that pretty much controls 1/7 of our nation's economy, which is the biggest economy in the world. Besides his international health delivery system, a second firm, Electronic Data System, operating under the umbrella of the parent company, the Perot Group, also stood to make out like a bandit with a lion's share of the nationwide computerized medical billing data business. The doctors who obtained Mrs. Clinton's records shaped a large body of dissidents in the medical field protesting the secrecy Mrs. Clinton imposed on her task force of 500 anonymous persons, while they went about drafting health care reform behind closed doors for almost all of 1993. In the unearthing that caused Perot's name to pop up in the First Lady's papers, curiosity was aroused as to why the Texas billionaire would serve in an advisory capacity for a president whom he opposed in the polls. Neither Perot nor Clinton ever publicly acknowledged that they knew each other or had ever spoken prior to their joint appearances on the stages of the debates with President George Bush during the '92 campaign. The link establishing Perot's connection to the president's wife led this reporter, who is George Carpozzi Jr., to Little Rock, Arkansas for an encounter with Larry Nichols, a former marketing manager of the Arkansas Development Financial Authority and a live guest on this very show, right here, the Old Cow Report. Larry Nichols was on this show via telephone, Fred, and you'll remember that night vividly.
Yes.
It's the night you fell off your stool and threw up.
I did not.
All right, Nichols was fired by Clinton in 1989 after the aide wondered aloud about what was happening to a slush fund set up with $200 million of taxpayer dollars that the government controlled. Nichols claimed Clinton was glomming money to finance his sexual escapades. A gadfly to Clinton long before he occupied the Oval Office, Nichols, 47, established the president's connection with Perot by citing conversations he had with Larry G. Patterson, a former Arkansas State Police trooper who served as Clinton's personal bodyguard when Clinton was governor. Until I had just recently spoken with Patterson, Nichols said, I only suspected that Clinton and Perot were cozy with each other. I have heard some talk about a relationship that they had, but there was nothing I could prove. Patterson put everything in perspective, and it made great sense to me. He told me that Clinton and Perot met or talked to each other on the phone or face-to-face at least 50 times from late September of '91 until just before the November elections the following year. 50 times, Red, they had conversations. Not only that, Freddie, Clinton met Perot in Dallas, in Little Rock, and other locales. Their get-togethers were clandestine. So far as Patterson could say, they were in each other's company by themselves, so that's why he believed the story never got out. Patterson, according to Nichols, said that Clinton dropped by to see Perot whenever he went to Dallas for some lovemaking with Jennifer Flowers. She's one of the bimbos during the bimbo eruptions during the '92 elections. His longtime paramour. Patterson can also vouch for the fact that most times Clinton spoke on the phone from his office in the governor's mansion to Perot in Dallas. Nichols continued, but after the '92 Democratic Convention in New York, which made Clinton the party's nominee, they met and spoke much more frequently, Fred, after Clinton gained the nomination. Even after Perot dropped out of the race, Clinton continued to talk to him just about as often as before. But when he returned to the race, Clinton was talking to him 3 or 4 times a day right up until the elections. Nichols said Patterson believes that all communication between Clinton and Perot apparently ceased after the election. Patterson's duties as Clinton's bodyguard diminished appreciably after the election. At that time, the Secret Service took full charge of protecting the president-elect, although he continued to occupy the governor's mansion in Little Rock until the inauguration. How much of Perot's ear Clinton has today is open to speculation, following the recommendation by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates to exclude Perot from the talk fest because he has no chance of winning the election. While Republican candidate Bob Dole applauded the commission's verdict, Clinton expressed regret, saying, I enjoyed having him in there in '92. 3 other sources, also former activists in 1992's United We Stand party, now the Reform Party, said essentially what Patterson was quoted as having told Nichols, that should Perot succeed in his spoiler's role, Clinton would make health reform his top priority and put the First Lady in charge of shaping the plan. Mrs. Carol Baker of Hot Springs, Arkansas, Lawrence Way of Middletown, Maryland, and Mrs. Pat Owens of East Troy, Wisconsin, said they were aware of Perot's doings with Clinton. Mr. Way and Mrs. Owens have suits pending against Perot in their respective states for wrongs and violations of their privacy they say he and his aides committed. It is a familiar plaint that Perot spied on them while they worked in his '92 campaign and pried into their personal finances and credit reports. Now, these people were working for Perot, trying to help him get elected. Patterson did not respond to this reporter's request for an interview. He is reportedly keeping a low public profile. Some say he fears for his life, since going public in January of '94 with the details of Clinton's sexual encounters with at least a half dozen identified women while he was governor. So there you have it, Freddie.
It's interesting.
It sure is. So we finally find out now that Perot and Clinton were in cahoots, and of course, we broke the story on here, on this show, back before the election. It was obvious what was going on. There's no way Clinton could win without Perot getting in the race. Okay, Freddie, well, we always like to tell people what went on in this day in history, Fred.
Yes.
And we use you as our authority in this area because you've been around for a few years and you study. Matter of fact, Fred, you're donating part of your personal library to one of the local churches in town, I understand.
I may do that, yes.
And it's a vast library, too. Many, many hundreds of books. Excellent books on World War II history, I understand. And any school library would love to have them. But sad to say, Fred, if you donated them to the Eau Claire Public Library or to the UW Library, you could go out the next day and find them in the trash bin. I'm sorry to say, Fred. So I'm glad that you're giving them to a church school, which will honor them and cherish them as part of our real history of what happened during the World War II and what it right afterwards. Okay, October 7th, Fred. 1780. American Revolutionary Forces defeat these forces at Kings Mountain, South Carolina, during the American Revolutionary War. What forces were those?
What forces?
Yeah, who did America fight during?
Well, it fought the British.
All right, they defeated the British forces at Kings Mountain, South Carolina, 1780. Okay, Freddie. 1950. U.S. forces invade North Korea. Now, you got to remember that. It was just 46 years ago. Hoping to force the government of North Korea to renew peace talks. And of course, during some of those pitched battles, we lost 53,000 Americans and several thousand were held prisoner right up to this day.
Yes.
Some of them were used in experiments by the North Koreans, and the Chinese and the Russians were used in some diabolical experiments where they injected them with all kinds of poisons, gassed them. And this was all done in controlled hospitals in Eastern Europe countries right after the Korean War, and all the way up into the Vietnam War, and some of our Vietnam prisoners were experimented on by the communists too. And the reason they used Americans was because it was during the Cold War and they wanted to see how we reacted to their tactics.
Brainwashing.
Brainwashing and whatever, physical and mental torture. And if you don't believe it, ask John McCain. He was tortured for several years in a North Korean prison cell while Hanoi Jane was up there hobnobbing with the communists and eating bananas. Go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Well, this question is directed towards Fred because he's a cool guy. Fred, why are you going to vote for Bob Dole?
I'm not going to vote for him.
Well, who are you going to vote for?
Howard Phillips.
What? He's not even a running guy. Come on.
That's who I'm going to vote for.
Oh, my Lord. I better talk to Chuck. Or, no, wait a minute. Fred, who is this Howard guy?
Howard Phillips is the chairman of the United States Taxpayers Party.
Oh, boy. Okay.
See, on the ballot,
He was on C-SPAN tonight.
he's on the ballot in 39 states.
Oh, okay, I got it. Hey, Chuck.
Yeah.
Remember a long time ago when you were going to sell these Ralph Reed CDs and all that?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? How can you like Ralph Reed? The guy's a complete idiot.
Wasn't selling it, I was giving it away.
Yeah. Did anyone get it? Because I bet no one wanted to get Ralph Reed because, you know, he's a dork.
Well, that's one young man's opinion, Fred, but Ralph Reed is the head of an organization with, 2 million people in it now, Christian conservatives, and they hold a lot of sway within the Republican Party.
They joined Bob Dole in making Bob Dole a candidate, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, things like that happen. Okay, Fred, we got to get to some local news here, but first, you got that short paragraph there you were going to tell me about now?
Well, I got a little something here. Now that Bob Dole is down the drain, say unless Kenneth Starr indicts Bill, Hillary, or Chelsea, the media, and this is from Joe Soburn's Washington Watch in the Wanderer, the media are proceeding ahead of schedule with the post-election spin. The lesson this year is that the American people in their wisdom aren't buying a tax cut because they're worried about the deficit and high interest rates that will result from cutting taxes. Why, sure, the other day, a taxman came to the door and said, "Oh, no," I'm going, "What do you want?" He would like to have a little treat for you. He gave me an envelope, and inside was a check for $3,000. And I gasped, "What's this, a joke? An accounting error?" "No, it's a tax refund." Great. It's about time you guys gave me some of my money back when suddenly it became suspicious. What's the catch? I wouldn't call it a catch, he said, but caution that if you cash this check or add a little more to the deficit, then increasing the risk of rise in interest rates next year.
Well, that's very interesting, Fred. So what do you think that will do then?
What?
That what you just read. What do you think? How do you think that'll affect everybody?
I don't know.
Is it good for you or bad?
What?
Will it be good for you or bad for you?
Well, I'm not getting any.
Okay, for those of you who's wondering who this is the head of the Common Man. He donated it to our show, and he said we could use it tonight only. So we want to thank you, Common Man, for donating your head. Okay. All right, Fred, now we got some business here. I remember it was just 2 short years ago when I was on the old campaign trail running for Congress, 3rd Congressional District against Steve Gunderson, and I was in several debates with him all across the district from Platteville all the way up to Rice Lake. And I was the only one during the campaign that was willing to bring these facts out about Steve, about his retirement. And I kept saying, "Steve, you're going to retire as a millionaire," and he kept denying it. I kept saying it. I said it on TV in La Crosse, and I said it in debates in Rice Lake and in Platteville and over by Neilsville. Everywhere I went, I kept saying, "Steve, quit deceiving the senior citizens. You're not going to retire on Social Security. You've got a great big fat multi-million-dollar retirement plan when you retire." And he would just chuckle and say that I was a liar. Well, here it is, Fred. From U.S. Term Limits, their newsletter, no uncertain terms, September-October 1996 issue, that lists who is leaving Congress and what they're taking with them. And it gives examples of what some of the people that are leaving Congress this year because of retirement, they're no longer going to run as a U.S. Senator or U.S. House. And some of the higher people here who are leaving like bandits, who have raped and pillaged the taxpayers for years, and now they're gleaning their blood money for it. So here's what some of them are going to get, Fred, in retirement. William Cohen, Republican from Pennsylvania, $3.4 million.
Cohen is from
William Cohen from Pennsylvania, $3.4 million. That's what it says here.
I thought what Cohen was from Maine.
He could very well be. Bob Packwood, $2.9 million. Here's one here. Harold Ford, Democrat from Tennessee, $3.3 million. These are their retirement packages. Andrew Jacobs, Democrat from Indiana, $2.7 million. Norman Mineta, Democrat from California, $2 million. Charlie Rose, Democrat, North Carolina, $2.9 million. Patsy Schroeder from Colorado, $4.2 million. That's $4.2 million in retirement. Gary Studs, Democrat, Massachusetts, $3.5 million. Bob Walker, Republican, Pennsylvania, $4.2 million, right up there with Patsy Schroeder. Charlie Wilson, Democrat, Texas, $2.8 million. David Pryor, Democrat, Arkansas, $2.3 million. Sam Nunn, $2.9 million. Bennett Johnson, Democrat, Louisiana, $2.3 million. No wonder they're bailing out Fred. Bill Bradley, the former basketball star, $2.6 million. And Steve Gunderson, $1.8 million in retirement. Right there, Freddie.
Yes.
Once again, I have been vindicated. And there you have it, Fred. We better take a call, Fred, and then we're going to go into a little bit of some of the pork. In other words, some of the big spending porkers out there in Washington who set up these big pork deals for their own districts and a lot of times just for themselves so that they could build monuments to themselves after they leave office. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hello. I was wondering there, Chuck, who are you going to vote for this year?
Well, I'll tell you. There's no choice. It comes down to Bob Dole, a man who fought and was wounded very seriously during World War II for our freedoms, so that we would have freedom to choose in this country. He sacrificed, almost died. So I'm voting for Bob Dole because it would be easy for me as being a baby boomer to side with Bill Clinton and say, yeah, let's all the baby boomers go into the 21st century together. But I'm scared of what the future holds with Bill Clinton in office. I know where Bob Dole stands, and I would agree with him more than I do Clinton. So that the choice to me is easy to make. It's Bob Dole.
Okay. Are you aware that this would be the first time that a president would be going backwards in a generation?
What do you mean by backwards?
I'm saying that going from a younger generation then back to an older generation, if Bob Dole did make it, how do you think that would affect our economy?
I don't think it would hurt it any at all because Bob Dole he's going to have people around him, just like Clinton has people around him that are all big spending liberals who are all for big government. They believe that government can solve every problem. And I'll tell you, every time you give away something to the government and it gets bigger, your freedoms get smaller in this country. It's a known fact. The more power you give to the government, that's the less power you have and the less freedom you have personally. The more taxes you send to the government in all forms, from state, local, county, federal, the more you send off to them, they're using that. They're using that in a lot of ways. They're using it against you and against your freedoms. It's time to decrease government, not make it bigger. And Clinton is for bigger government. If you don't believe me, go back and look back to the health care system that they wanted to set up, which would have been set up as a socialist system controlling 1/7 of the nation's economy, and it would have been set up into a big socialist boondoggle run by Hillary Clinton. And I'm telling you, they were trained in Italy under communists, under the economic systems of communists in Italy, and they came back and set up some of those programs in Arkansas. They were total failures. Arkansas is almost last in every category you can think of, education, banking, whatever you can think of. Up and down the line, Arkansas is in the bottom 10. And that's what we've got running this country right now. We got a good old boy system. And I don't trust Clinton. There's too many bodies piled up around him. And maybe Fred's a little upset there about Bob Dole, but Fred knows better than that, because Fred knows by wasting his vote on Howard Phillips, who's a good man, that he's wasting his vote. And basically, it's going to come right back down to the same thing again. It's going to come down to Perot siding with Clinton, helping Clinton get back in there. So every vote counts this time. You can't be wasting your votes on minor third-party candidates.
And how do you feel about immigration? Like in Eau Claire, where you're among friends, and I'm kind of offended by your raccoon sign, since, I mean, I feel that, that's wrong against us black people as being coons. I think that's a racist subject there.
It is. You see the raccoon's head there?
Yes, I do.
Where's the connection? Raccoons are animals. This is an animal skin here. This is a real raccoon hat here. So you're just blowing smoke. You don't even know what you're talking about. Fred, sometimes you have people like that are pretty much just ignorant. What's that word say, Fred? It says raccoon. That's right. A raccoon's head there. This is a raccoon hat.
Yeah.
This is the Loyal Order of the Raccoons Lodge meeting number 1. We're the first lodge in the United States, perhaps the world. All right. Okay, Fred. We'll be taking more calls from some more intelligent people. So what do you got there, Freddie?
Well, I got this book here last week, and it's called Unlimited Access, an FBI agent inside the Clinton White House, and it's Gary Aldrich. And on the back of it, it says, "We pure political dynamite," and testimony from former FBI agent and FBI insider. Unlimited Access is the first book that tells what is really going on in the Clinton White House. The answer is terrifying and demands congressional hearings. And that's written by Jack Anderson, syndicated columnist.
All right, Jack Anderson, syndicated communist.
And Regnery was the printers of the book.
Okay, Fred. Well, we told you we were going to talk about a little pork tonight, Fred, and these are some of the pork projects that were introduced by senators or House representatives and tried to be pushed down on the people of the United States, the taxpayers. The first one is railways without trains. Though indicted on charges of bribery for the past several years, Representative Joseph McDade has managed to earmark lots of bacon back in Pennsylvania. Whether it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for soybean-based ink research or $63 million to build a historic site in homage to railways in a town without trains, McDade's place on the Appropriations Committee means that even under indictment, the pork goes home. And here's one, the Lifetime Achievement Award. In the United States Senate since 1962, Daniel Inouye from Hawaii has oinked more than $600 million in pork for Hawaii in just 5 years. That's almost $329,000 per day, including weekends and holidays of pure bacon. Examples include $2 million to build one canoe, and $116 million for one of the island's cleanup, more than 4 times the money requested. Gems like these make Inouye a shoe-in for the Roast Lifetime Achievement Award from Citizens Against Government Waste. Here's another one, Fred. The Senate appropriated $1 million for research on the brown tree snake. It didn't take $1 million to figure out that the snake is found only in Guam, poses no threat to humans, and does not have the ability to survive in North America. But they spent $1 million on a brown tree snake in Guam, which is just a little island in the middle of nowhere.
Yes.
Okay, here's another one, Fred. This one's called the Pope of Pork. Known as the Pope of Pork, Senator since 1953, Robert Byrd, earns his way onto the pages of no uncertain terms in almost every issue. Besides the countless buildings, highways, bridges, and parks that bear his name because of his pork barreling, he pulled off one of the most shocking moves in the history of pork politics. In 1990, he closed the FBI's National Fingerprinting Laboratory to send it a little over 200 miles away to West Virginia, his home state. The project meant 2,500 jobs for the state and $500 million in startup money. So there you have it, Fred. Just a few of the porkers out there in Washington are spending hard-earned taxpayers' dollars. All right, we better take a call, Fred, and then we'll go to your next lively bit of information there. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I had a question about upcoming presidential elections.
All right.
I was just wondering, do you think it really matters who is in office?
Yes, it matters very much so.
You think that no matter who is in office, that the person can change the crime rate, the drugs, can a man really do that?
Well, it's more than just a man. Donna Shalala, who was formerly from Wisconsin, head of the University of Wisconsin system, is the head of Health and Human Services, I think it is, Fred.
Yes.
And their budget is bigger than most governments in the world. I mean, it's one of the biggest budgets in the world, next to the United States government's budget. She spends hundreds of millions of dollars to sway opinion, to send money to her pet projects, to make government bigger, and to pay off people that are pretty much in her pocket, or in other words, it goes towards keeping the liberals happy. That money is pumped into those liberal programs that have been failing for 40 years. So what I'm saying is when Dole gets in there, the people he puts in his cabinet, and the people that he puts in charge of the military, the people he puts in charge of transportation and all these offices, they do make a difference. They can turn the ship around.
But if they can't change the hearts of people, they can't make it a safe place to live in America.
Well, they can do one thing. They can
change the hearts.
Okay, one of the reasons why you're talking about I think one of the reasons you're talking about that is because we have right now, we have a glut of new drugs into this country. We have an amphetamine epidemic, Fred, that is sweeping across the western part of the country and now is making inroads into the United States, and it's very easily made in clandestine labs. They've busted them up right here in Wisconsin, but amphetamines is a very, very dangerous drug, which is getting a foothold. We have a cocaine epidemic in this country. Now, these things have all happened in the last 44 months. And I'm telling you, since the day Clinton came into office, he's kind of nodded and winked at the drug situation in this country. And he's cut back on funding for that. All of a sudden, we get into an election year, and all of a sudden, it's coming back to roost, and he's jumping around hiring people as drug czars and stuff, but he wasn't doing anything before 1996. So we've got a heroin epidemic. River Phoenix, one of your young and up-and-coming movie stars, we showed his picture laying in the coffin, was a heroin addict. Kurt Cobain was a heroin addict. I've seen the autopsies of his body where he shot himself in the head and blew his head off. I've seen that gory mess. That was done under a heroin and other drug influence stupor. In the movies that are on the screens right now, there's an overwhelming amount of pushing by the studio heads, the Paramounts and the Disneys and Columbia Pictures and all of them. They're pushing not only glorifying and glamorizing heroin addiction by showing countless numbers of people injecting heroin and snorting it in different movies, but they're also showing a glut of cigarettes, people using cigarettes during this programming, mainly in the movies. Everybody's smoking. It doesn't matter what movie star you see, they're smoking cigarettes. You also see the glamorizing of cocaine and marijuana usage. So in the last 44 months, thanks to Hollywood and a liberal president, who some say is a cocaine addict himself, we have a glut of drugs in this country. And where do most of them coming from? The same place they're coming from, as I said in 1992 when I was running for Congress. They're coming from across the Mexican border. And if we close off that Mexican border, if we have to use troops, which Bob Dole is saying we'll use National Guard troops, but we are going to need troops to stop the influx of drugs. But we have to stop this heroin epidemic, cocaine epidemic, methamphetamine epidemic, and what else, Fred? What other drugs are coming into this country like crazy?
Marijuana.
Marijuana is kind of a homegrown product, but we have a lot of stuff coming across the border. And it's affecting our youth, Fred. The youth amongst the teenagers is up 140, 150%. I don't care what that lying hillbilly from Arkansas said last night in the debate. The facts are in. He's stonewalling information from his own FBI and from his own Justice Department, memos that have been sent to him telling him that his policies are failed and that he needs to turn this drug thing around. He's refusing to release that information, Fred, on the true facts about the drug use amongst the young kids in this country.
How about the true facts about his drug use?
You go to any major city in this nation and you go to the hospitals and they'll tell you cocaine overdoses are up, heroin overdoses are skyrocketing, methamphetamine overdoses are skyrocketing, tranquilizer overdoses are skyrocketing. People are dropping over like flies from too strong a heroin coming into this country. It's being flooded in here. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hey, I got a question for Fred. Hey, when Dole gets elected, do we get a free swastika armband with each vote that we cast?
What's that?
When Dole gets elected, do we get a free swastika armband with each vote that we cast?
I don't think so.
Well, it's probably better than the lavender triangle or lavender triangle. What are they? Pyramids or what are the triangles, Fred? Lavender triangles that Clinton and his bunch have been handing out for the last 4 years. Okay, Freddie. Here's another one, Fred. Taxpayers finance Clinton's database on 200,000 people. Clinton has got himself a database there that he watches his enemies with, and it was paid for by the taxpayers. Several $1 million is used to set up this system that keeps a dossier in the computer, in the Washington-based computer that's in the White House, on over 200,000 citizens, Fred. Here's another one. Access log to FBI files has a 6-month gap. Look at poor Nixon. 18-minute gap on his tape, and he had to resign office. Here's a 6-month gap on files that were sent from the FBI to the White House. And it started out at 300 files the White House admitted to, then it jumped to about 500, then to 900. The latest word is now that it's almost 2,400 FBI files that the White House had under their control illegally, Fred. Now, this stuff might not hit the fan before the election, but heads are going to roll afterwards. People are going to be indicted, and it stinks right in the White House, Fred. A lot of this stuff is going to come back to roost right in Hillary and Bill's laps right there. And Fred, there, the Boston Globe. That's no little right-wing fanatic newspaper. It's the Boston Globe in the heartland of liberalism, Massachusetts. One of their editorials was Jeff Jacoby's 80 Reasons to Say No to Bill Clinton. 80 different reasons why Bill Clinton should not be elected. So wise up here and listen up, Fred. Here's one of them. Number 1, Jocelyn Elders.
Yes.
What'd she do? She tried to push masturbation to grade school kids. She said that drugs should be legalized. Her own son was a cocaine dealer, and the guy that testified against him, they found him murdered in a hotel room not too many months after he testified against Jocelyn Elders' son, who went to prison for cocaine dealing. That's the number 1 reason why, right there, because of the bums that Clinton surrounded himself with. 100,000 more police on the streets. Have you seen them yet?
No, they aren't all on the streets.
A tax cut for the middle class. Have you seen it yet?
Nope.
Bill Clinton passed the biggest tax increase in the history of the world. Webster Hubbell, 3rd man in the Justice Department, right behind Janet Reno, who helped murder 90 people down in Waco, Texas. Webb Hubbell doing prison time right now for his shenanigans. Clinton went on national television and answered questions about his underwear. That's the number 6 reason why not to vote for him. Another one, Craig Livingston, one of the bouncers, the bar bouncer that they had in the White House guarding the Clintons, who helped to get those 2,000 plus files out of the FBI so that they could dig into personal people's lives and use information against them for blackmail. Hillary's 1,342-page health care reform would have created 33 new federal agencies and 200 regional alliances, would have added $70 billion to the federal budget deficit, and had taken away your right to choose your own doctor. Reason number 14, a murdering, lying terrorist from the Middle East, Yasser Arafat, hobnobbing in the White House with Clinton. Reason number 15, a murdering, lying terrorist from Northern Ireland named Jerry Adams, hobnobbing in the White House with Bill Clinton. Reason number 37, Hazel O'Leary. You know what she did, Fred, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Reason number 36, the Arkansas State Troopers said they were often called upon to act as intermediaries to arrange and conceal Clinton's extramarital encounters. They say they frequently picked up and delivered gifts from Clinton to various women and often drove Clinton to meetings with women. We were more than bodyguards. We had to lie, cheat, and cover up for that man, said Larry G. Patterson, a 26-year veteran state policeman from the state of Arkansas. Reason number 40, Clinton argued in court that Paula Jones' sexual harassment suit should be postponed until he leaves office because he is on active duty as Commander-in-Chief. And this is coming from a draft-dodging, cocaine-snorting, marijuana-puffing adulterer claiming now that he has he's a commander-in-chief and he's on active duty in the military, and that's why he can't allow the courts to go ahead with this sexual harassment lawsuit by Paula Jones.
That should not have been allowed.
Right. Okay, another one, number 8. His pet scheme, AmeriCorps, pays college-age volunteers more than $7 an hour. If you're a volunteer, why are you getting $7 an hour, Fred? It brings new meaning to the word volunteer. Clinton calls the Defense of Marriage Act. This is number 25. Clinton calls the Defense of Marriage Act gay baiting, pure and simple, and promises to sign it. Hillary chats with Eleanor Roosevelt. That's number 27 reason why not to vote for the Clintons. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hello, Fred.
Yes.
I was wondering, do you think that drugs should be legalized like Chuck does? Isn't that what you said before, or am I mistaken?
Oh, I'm opposed to the legalization of drugs.
Yeah, I never said anything about that. Okay, Vice President Al Gore on Russian President Boris Yeltsin, July 16, 1996. To me, he looks good. On every score, President Yeltsin was actively engaged and seemed in very good shape. In fact, Yeltsin had just suffered a heart attack and remains gravely ill. That was reason number 43. Reason number 47, the Clintons donate their used underwear to charity and deduct it on their tax returns. Reason number 51, a historic fact and a historic first. The First Lady is called before a grand jury. Reason number 54, Fred. Number of White House aides with a history of serious drug abuse, according to the Secret Service, more than 40 of them. Okay, reason number 55. Cuba blows 4 unarmed Americans out of the sky, killing them in cold blood, and Clinton does nothing to punish Fidel Castro. As a matter of fact, he was glorifying Castro last night, saying, let's just leave him alone, he'll become a Democrat sooner or later. Okay, go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, do you think Tommy Thompson will run for president in the year 2000? And do you think he's good enough for that?
Okay, Freddie, what do you think about that? Tommy Thompson, year 2000.
Well, Tommy Thompson is a shrewd man. That is possible, and he probably would be well qualified for that job and do a good job if elected.
All right, well, Tommy Thompson is going to have to get by our Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp is going to be running. Bob Dole is only going to be a one-term president. He's going to retire, and he's going to turn it over to Jack Kemp in the year 2000. Jack Kemp is going to run and be elected as president and hold office for 8 years. And that's basically the bottom line. Jack Kemp is a motivational speaker. He knows how to talk to people of all races, creeds, colors, genders. He knows how to reach out, Fred. And
he spent a lot of money reaching out to our cities.
And he's pro-life too. Yeah. And he's a shoo-in to be the presidential nominee in the year 2000. And so I think Tommy is going to have to take second best. And I could see Jack Kemp going for somebody from the Midwest, like Tommy Thompson, to be the vice presidential candidate in the year 2000, because Kemp has roots in California and in New York, so he needs somebody in the middle. And who better than Tommy Thompson? All right. Okay, Fred, another reason. Number 57, when 5 Americans in Saudi Arabia are killed by a car bomb, or when 19 more our Americans are killed by a second bomb when that building went down. Reason number 58, he shut down Pennsylvania Avenue. First president to ever do that. Number 60, well, actually, reason number 59, shameless exploitation number 1. I have vivid and painful memories of black churches being burned in my own state when I was a child. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, no black churches were burned in Arkansas when Clinton was a child. And that's a known fact, and it's been studied. Reason number 60, shameless exploitation number 2. Christopher Reeve in a wheelchair at the convention. Shameless exploitation number 3. Vote for Al Gore because his sister died of lung cancer. Okay, reason number 63. He normalized relations with Vietnam, one of the planet's nastiest dictatorships. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hello.
I just want to ask you a question. What do you think won the election last night? Or the debate, I mean.
Okay, Fred, who do you think won the debate last night?
Well, I must confess that I think that Bob Dole did a good job, and he came across well, in my opinion, without lying about some of the things that Mr. President Clinton lied about.
Yeah, I think Dole won it by maybe on a basis of 100%. I would say it was 51-49, Dole's favor. The debate Wednesday night will be one to watch between the two vice presidential candidates, and you're going to see Jack Kemp carry that one by a mile. That one will be probably more like 62-38 as far as percentages. As a matter of fact, I just talked to a guy tonight, Fred, earlier tonight, that had Al Gore in his platoon in Vietnam, and he said he was nothing but trouble, nothing but a troublemaker and worthless. That's what he said about Al Gore. Okay, reason number 68, missing files, shredded files, Stonewall files, carted out of Vince Foster's office in the dead of night files. Reason number 71, in 50 years he's never had a private sector job. And reason number 72, if I were a single man, I might ask that mummy out. That's a good-looking mummy. Really, you need to go see her. Clinton on a 500-year-old Peruvian corpse. And before we take another call, reason number 75, he vetoed the bipartisan bill to ban late-term, partial birth abortions, which Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who's a Democrat, calls close to infanticide, Fred. Even the Democrats were kind of pulling back from that one. A lot of Democrats crossed the aisle and voted to override Clinton's veto on that. It's a shame, Fred, that partial birth abortion is nothing but Nazism at its worst in this country. And they try and say it's only a few hundred, but I just read an article where over 1,000 of them were performed in New Jersey alone last year. It's another lie. It's used, thousands of them are being performed. They're sucking the brains out of live babies and using it for research, live brain cells. And of course, then they pull the rest of the body out of the mother and throw it in the paper can. I'm telling you, if you think that's okay, then you agree with what Hitler did in Germany. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, guess what, Chuck? It's the common man, and I've actually got my own head. I'm not sure exactly where that one came from. When I was told it was Joe Hisrich, but we won't go into that. By the way, it's also nice to see that all those phone calls I've been giving to Sybil Shepherd, finally decided to vote for Dole this time. So somebody put that on camera, that'll prove that. I just thought I'd mention it.
Well, the common man head speaks. I'll tell you, that's the modern miracle of television. We've got the common man's head right here, and the rest of his body called from his house. It's amazing. Now, Common, don't forget to come down here and get your head tonight after the show. Okay, Fred, what do you got there?
Hi. Draft dodger, political opportunist. Clinton evaded the draft during the Vietnam War. In December '69, while a student at Oxford in England, he wrote this revealing note to Colonel Eugene Holmes, his ROTC director. I've written and spoken against the war. One of my roommates is a draft resistor. He is one of the bravest and best men I know. I decided to accept the draft in spite of my beliefs for one reason: to maintain my political viability within the system. And here, Father Andrew McSorley, a Jesuitist, liberal activist, and a professor at Georgetown University where Clinton studied, wrote in his 1977 book, Peace Eyes, that Clinton had participated in an anti-war discrimination demonstration against the U.S. Embassy in England in November 15, 1969. Wrote, I was waiting for the ceremony to begin, and Bill Clinton of Georgetown, studying as Rhodes Scholar, Oxford, come up and welcomed me. He was one of the organizers.
Well, that's very interesting, Fred, and I'm glad to see that
That's from the Clinton record.
You brought that in here. Well, where'd you find that at?
I don't remember now. I get so much stuff that comes in the mail, I don't remember.
And from what I hear, you better start throwing some of that stuff out. All right. Reason number 62 before we take the next call. Throughout most of my life, I raised tobacco. I want you to know that with my own hands, all of my life, I put it in the plant beds and transferred it. I hoed it. I chopped it. I've shredded it. I've spiked it, and I've sold it. Who said that? Al Gore, campaigning in North Carolina in 1988. Are you still there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hey, guys, just want to say I love your show.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, my question is, how do you guys feel about the parrot not being invited to the debate?
You got your TV on there?
Yeah, I'm watching right now.
Well, you got to turn your sound down. We're getting a little feedback.
Ooh, sorry, okay. I turn it down. Okay.
All right, now, what'd you say?
Oh, I was wondering how you guys felt about Perot not being invited to the debate.
Well, from what we just revealed here tonight, that Perot is just a shill for Clinton. I could care less if Perot gets invited to be dog catcher down there in Dallas, Texas, because all he was doing was investing his 40, 50, 70 million because he knew that it would return him 700-800 million, 10 times that amount when he got his greedy little capitalistic hands on that healthcare system. And because of the computer system that he runs, he would have been handling millions of the medical records around the country for this whole system that him and Hillary were setting up, this big socialist boondoggle. So I could care less about Perot and his parasites. Okay, Freddie. Reason number 77. Percentage of Americans who believe one or both Clintons have broken the law. 53%. Reason number 78. They don't call him Slick Willie for nothing. Reason number 79 not to vote for Clinton. He wants more money for the National Endowment for Arts. And of course, we've seen what they've done.
Yeah, they got a lot of...
Crucifix and a bottle of urine and everything else.
Yeah, that's true.
He wants, okay, reason number 80. The national debt in 1992. Now here's another one of, this is going to set the record straight from what Clinton lied to the American people last night about. 1992. The national debt was $4 trillion. In 1996, the national debt is $5.2 trillion. Clinton increased it 30%. The era of big government marches on. Okay, and reason number, we got 80 of them here, Fred. We've got many, many of them. Reason number 12, his cabinet that looks like America actually contains 14 lawyers and 10 millionaires. Now this is a cabinet that he was going to set up that is supposed to mirror America. 14 lawyers and 10 millionaires. Reason number 22, George Stephanopoulos' explanation. The president has to get his haircut like everybody else. That's when he spent $200 for the haircut and held up traffic at an airport.
Yeah.
Okay, we better take this call here, and then we got to get the horses headed on out here.
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, what's on your mind?
I just want to ask you about the proposed Eau Claire Arena. I think it's feasible. Back off.
The Eau Claire Arena?
Yeah, I think it's feasible.
No, the Eau Claire Arena is just the pipe dream of a couple of people that had they were probably, when they first met and scribbled this on their napkins and stuff, They were probably in a garage with the garage door closed and a car running when they sat down and cut this deal. Like we said in the last several shows, this is for a handful of insiders who are going to make some money on the front end of it, and then they're going to turn it over to the city so that the taxpayers of the city can pay for it when it becomes the big loser that it surely will be. Go ahead, caller. You're the final call of the night.
Yeah, say, I heard something up in the University of Minnesota the other day that Saddam Hussein or whatever, he's having a whole floor redone over there at no clinic, and he's going to be here within the next 6 weeks. Why would we allow him into this country at this point when we're in turmoil with their country?
Right here in Eau Claire, they're going to have.
Oh, at Mayo Clinic in Rochester.
Saddam Hussein's coming over, huh?
He's having the whole floor. He does that when he comes over to have his medical stuff done.
He's probably dying of terminal syphilis. Yeah. Thanks a lot for calling. We appreciate that, Fred, and hopefully maybe Minnesota will try and keep him out. We do appreciate you watching the show tonight. I've been your host, Chuck Lee. Of course, with me as usual, Fred Stafford, and my rusty trusty director, Roy Rogers Hoff Sr., who is related to Hopalong Cassidy on one side and Trigger on the other. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Adios, amigos and amigas.
Good night.
Good night. This closes the meeting.